Hope everybody is doing well on this particular Thursday morning and all. The weather is definitely different than is usual for a February, at least here in Durham, North Carolina. I think we're supposed to be having temperatures around the high 60s or the 70s. Definitely not typical weather for the winter and all in that kind of space. But we'll see what folks have to say about the weather is where they are located at. I know I've got somebody here from Utah and somebody here from New York. So we're going to see how the weather is cooperating in their neck of the woods. And of course, there are all kinds of things happening in the world as well. So I'm going to get to some of those news items. And of course, people are still thinking about what happened with the State of the Union. I'm sure we'll have some discussion around that as well. So definitely there are a lot of things that are taking place in the world and all in that space. So I'm gonna bring up a couple of the items and then I'll bring up Dan Worthington and I've got Lee Newton Rhodes with me as well. And by the way, I don't know if y'all have been checking out Lee's post on LinkedIn, but if you've not, definitely go and check those out. He gives some great poll questions that are very insightful and interesting on a regular basis. So oftentimes am challenged with the questions that he asks. Sometimes they are things around morality, politics, and all in that kind of space. As a matter of fact, I think the last one was whether our politicians are actually being owned by foreign influences. And definitely it looks like the majority of the folks were thinking that there are a lot of politicians that are having that influence by those foreign agents and all in that kind of way. So it'll be interesting to see what he says about some of his other poll questions that he's put out there on LinkedIn as well. And it looks like that whole thing is going on in Memphis with the Tyree Nichols case and all in that space. Apparently, the Memphis City Council grilled their police and fire chiefs on reform following Tyree Nichols' death. And it does look like there are documents that showing that the Memphis officers took photos of Tyree Nichols' beaten body. So that is some of the things that are going on in that space. And as I've said before, the police chief that is currently in Memphis was the police chief here in Durham, North Carolina, before she went over there. So it looks like she left the pot and went into the frying pan, as that old analogy goes in that space. And in some of the things that we are seeing, of course, we're seeing a lot of people that are still reacting to the way that the Biden's speech. Some of the folks are saying that he was a little bit feistier than usual, and some folks are also making comments about some of the heckling that was going on and whether this is the new norm. But I can't say that this is the first time, whether it even hasn't happened under Democratic administrations and Republican administrations as well, because we all do remember that famous incident or infamous incident of Pelosi tearing up documents in front of Trump at one of his State of the Union addresses as well. And so whether it's heckling or whether it's tearing up papers or whatever, this might be the new norm in politics. But we'll be interested to see what folks think about that as we continue discussions around a lot of things in the world. And Biden has a proposal to cap all insulin prices at $35 a month. But there are a lot of folks that are saying that that has little chance of passing, even though there are a lot of people that probably could use that kind of support, as there are a number of diabetics and others that use insulin on a regular basis and that kind of thought. And definitely some of the other news stories that I am seeing are that an ex-Twitter executive faces a GOP probe on Hunter Biden. So that is something that we are seeing in some of the things going on, even with Hunter Biden and some of the things that are going on in that space. And Biden has introduced a bill to sunset all federal programs, including Social Security. So definitely that'll be interesting to see what folks are going to say about that and how that will go over or not. And then just in terms of the international community, and then like I said, I'll bring up Dan and Lee, and definitely, like I said before, Lee does that great commentary that I always enjoy on LinkedIn. But there is still fallout about the Chinese balloon, and even over there in North Korea, apparently North Korea's Kim Jong Un was showing off his ICBMs and nuclear weapons in a parade. So he was definitely letting folks know that he maybe considers himself to be like a powerhouse in the global community as well, or at least he wants folks to think that is what is going on. And we all know that earlier in the political landscape, there was things around John Fetterman, and apparently he was hospitalized after feeling lightheaded at a Senate Democratic retreat. So that just happened recently, and all in that space. And I do know that there were some folks that were even surprised that he beat Oz, who's definitely got that media background and all in that kind of space. So, like I said, that's some of the things that I am hearing. By the way, Biden's State of the Union, if you're wondering, and of course, we'll have some conversation around that as well, drew the second smallest audience in decades. So that is what Fox News reported. I'm not sure what the smallest was, but maybe I'll get back and figure that out as well. So we may see that in the news and other news stories that I wanted to get to. And of course, we want to hear what else is going on in the world. But California cities, so it looks like it's more than just one city, are being rattled by prostitution and human trafficking in broad daylight. And definitely that is going on as the police force there is trying to deal with those incidences on a regular basis. So that is some of the things that we are hearing about in the world. There is still that deadly earthquake in Turkey and Syria. So that is something else that folks are paying attention to. And of course, we cannot forget that war in Ukraine. Zelensky is arrived in Paris after pressing the London Parliament or the United Kingdom Parliament to give further aid and all in that space. Matter of fact, he made a surprise visit to London's House of Commons, hoping to secure powerful English planes. And so he is still trying to get more weaponry to fight against Russia and that attack that they are having as well. And like I mentioned yesterday, there's all that cocaine that's been floating over in the ocean and everything. So apparently 3.5 tons of cocaine worth over 300 million was discovered floating in the Pacific Ocean. And last but not least, Russia is blaming the U.S. for the Nord Stream blast and threatens consequences. So Russia is now, I guess, going to turn its attention on to the United States and see what's going to happen in that regards. So definitely that is something that we are hearing. And the last thing that I'm going to bring up, and like I said, I promised a while back that I'd bring up my panelists, and I think I've got a few of them with me now, is that the Church of England is exploring the idea of a gender neutral God. So that is one of the things that they are exploring as well. So I'm going to bring up Dan. And like I said, Dan is here with me and glad to see him here. And Lee Newton Rhodes, who is always here. Lee, as you heard, I've become a big fan of those polls of yours on a regular basis. So glad to give them a plug.
Thank you, Mark.
Folks are watching and have not actually tuned in to those LinkedIn polls. And of course, I've got Sasha here.
Much appreciated.
Going to give us a idea of what's going on there in the Ukrainian war and all in that kind of space. But definitely glad to be here with you and fellas and everything. But I guess I'll start with you, Sasha, and then of course we'll get to that discussion around the State of the Union. And like I said, I'm sure people have observations of their own. But Sasha, how are things going over there in that war? I do know that Zelensky, as I said, is out there trying to recruit further weapons into his arms and everything so that he can continue fighting against what Russia is doing. But I know that you're staying on top of that news story. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what is going on. And I do know that, like I said yesterday, Putin has been investigated. He'll probably face investigations whenever this Ukrainian war is over. But he is facing different investigations around his active role in shooting down flight MH17, which, if I remember correctly, was that Malaysian airline that was shot down several years back.
Zelensky is doing tremendously well. He has a triumph in England. He was met right at the airport with the Prime Minister Sunak. He was taken to 10 Downing Street to his residence. Then he addressed English Parliament, and finally he had audience with King Charles III. Um, he was standing ovation in the Parliament, and then he went to Paris same day, met with Emmanuel Macron and Scholz from Germany, and right now he is being accepted in the European Union Parliament in Brussels. And I just saw a few minutes ago there was Ukrainian anthem was played, and then the European Union anthem, which is Beethoven Symphony Number Nine, Ode to the Joy, and now he's going to address European Parliament. Yeah, very very touchy pictures. Now, what is his aim on this trip is now the decision has been made to supply Ukraine with enough weapons to not just to deter Putin's army, but to beat it, actively going into counterattack. The only thing, important thing, very important at this time, is the speed of which all these Western weapons will reach Ukraine. The speed is becoming just maybe even more important than the substance, because if you will get all those wonderful weapons in 6, 9 months, and in the meantime, Russia will have a huge offensive, and Ukraine will not have enough weapons and may lose as a result of it, then who needs all these weapons in 9 months? So the speed is becoming a very important issue, and that's I would think Zelensky will address as the most important issue right now.
One of the things I was curious about is one of the other news items that I saw, and I don't know what your thoughts about this are, but we have a major world leader in the sense of a business world leader that apparently is not allowing one of his main items to be used by the Ukrainians. So Elon Musk is definitely one of the people that owns SpaceX, and apparently he is barring Kiev from using the Starlink technology for the drones and all in that kind of space. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts around that, because he's definitely been putting that out there recently that he wants to curb the Ukrainian use of Starlink internet for drones and all in that kind of space.
Well, don't forget he's heavily influenced by Russian propaganda. It's not the first time that he's following that. And in the meantime, Ukrainians found a replacement for his system and will not depend on his whims anymore. So that's being mitigated. What's the most interesting thing about Ukraine is the position of the Republican Party. There is a huge number of Republicans who are criticizing Biden for being too slow, done too little. They have to do much more for Ukraine or so on. Yet there is another part of Republican Party, a smaller one, I must admit. They're so called Trumpists, and they are criticizing Biden that he should not provide any help to Ukraine whatsoever, and stop it right now, and so on. So that's a very interesting position. How it's not that America is divided between what Democrats
I,
want.
I don't think that Trump has that position, Sasha. So they may be Trumpists. I don't know, but Trump is does not taking the position that Ukraine should not be supported. So for your to you have you described those people as Trumpists is probably not a fair. I know you hate Trump, but it's not a fair classification.
Okay, Dan, I will not fight you on that. Especially, I think that Trump has made some noises that no more help to Ukraine. I think he did, but again, I don't have any materials in front of me to support it, but I heard that. So maybe I'll find it and I'll introduce it.
Well, there would not have been a war if Trump would have remained as president.
It's a speculation, Dan.
No, there wouldn't have been because Trump wouldn't have
Dan,
stood for it.
it is a speculation unless we will go back, say, 3
Well,
years.
no, it's because
Don't try.
Biden is such a weak president, and because he screwed up in Afghanistan, it emboldened his enemies. And so that's not speculation. That's what happened. And all policy makers are agreeing that that's what the case is. Trump was the stronger leader. Russia didn't want to screw with him. That's one of the reasons that they didn't want him to be the successor, and the election was rigged. So, not that I'm a supporter of Trump.
Dan?
I know that you're
Dan?
not.
I'm sorry, Sasha and Dan, did Trump have any direct ties to Russia, business ties? I mean, to Ukraine, equivalent to what the Biden family does?
Of course,
Well, I mean-
yes. Everybody knows that Trump, when he bankrupted his 6 casinos in Atlantic City, he was penniless and no U.S. bank would touch him. He was minus $400,000. He lost all his father's money, all his own money, everything. Nobody would touch him except one bank. It was a Deutsche Bank, which used Russian oligarchs' money that started to prompt up Trump because he was KGB assets since the late 70s.
Really?
Absolutely.
No, none of that's verifiable. That's just your BS.
Yeah, no, it's well-known fact. There is a,
God,
there is
you're
a
so full
little.
of it.
It all started in '79 with a little TV shop in Manhattan, where Trump went on to buy 200 television sets for his new hotel that he just built. I think it was First Hotel. And interestingly enough, the shop was owned by 2 Russian KGB trained agents. So Trump, he said that he wants to buy 200 sets, and they recommended, okay, here are exactly the sets that you need at very good price, and we will give you a credit. You don't pay anything now. In 1 month's time, you'll pay it off. What are those TV sets that he purchased? It was PAL-SICAM system, which is not being used in North America, but in Europe and, of course, in Russia. So through these 200 television sets, KGB could spy on everything what was going in his hotel. And
Sasha, what year was this?
sorry,
What year was this? Did this happen with the TV sets?
I wouldn't resist, but I would question why do I need PAL-SICAM system in United States?
Okay, so Sasha,
I agree with you. What year did this take place? I agree with you. What year did this take place?
I want to come with
Well,
this.
It's just a beginning.
okay.
Because if it would be
listen.
just one episode, that
Sasha,
would be okay.
I
It's a
trained as a
beginning.
telecommunications information system officer in the United States Air Force. There is not a single television that's been produced in the United States today that can't be used in the same way by any of our foreign agents.
79 was a different story, Dan. It was RCA.
No,
It's
back
me.
even back then it was true. And
Hey,
so
Hey, Sasha and Dan,
But
one of
Dan,
the
wait a
questions
moment. We're not talking about where that television set was produced. That's not the point. The issue was that in United States at this time, and now it's still used absolutely different system. NCK, I'm not so sure I can find it out.
so
And
so
Europe
what
and
is
Russia
this
used
being
PAL-SICAM.
reported anywhere if it's true?
Oh,
I think it's
all
more of your propaganda. Just like
done.
most of what
No,
you're saying
no.
about Ukraine is propaganda
Dan, it
for
was
Ukraine.
no, Dan. It was
Oh, no.
described a few years ago in a book by the name American Compromat, which was written by one very well esteemed author, and it's not the first book on the subject. And believe it or not, if it's not true, at least somebody would sue the author and publisher of that book. I think it was Simon and Schuster. There are a lot of money to be squeezed from this publisher and from the author. Nobody bothered to sue because it was just the beginning of alliance between Trump and KGB.
Okay,
And in
so
1987, even
hey,
before,
listen,
even before the Soviet Union
so the
collapsed,
Steele
Trump
dossier and all that
visited
other crap that was debunked, right? If there was
Hey,
real material out there that tied Trump to the USSR or the Soviets at the time, maybe, why wasn't that included in any of the dossiers and the fake reports that were put together to try to discredit him? None of this information was used, in that context. Now, the only thing I happen to know is the fact that the Biden family received large sums of money from the Ukrainians through these companies,
need proof.
and including.
Proof.
Okay, and so Biden was actually convicted, President Biden, in a Ukrainian court for taking a bribe from the Ukrainians, a Ukrainian company. It's part of the record. That happened. Ukrainian court decided that President Biden was guilty. It was put under the rug, and no one has heard about it.
I've never thought about that.
Okay, so we know that President Biden has taken money from the Chinese, either directly or through his son. We know that his Penn Center office was built and maintained by the Chinese, and he received donations from the Chinese to support it. We know that there are a number of corrupt deals that have been documented by the Biden family, graft and corruption and influencing peddling around the world, including China. And so, what am I to say? Trump was a private businessman back in 1979. I don't think he ever was a KGB asset. He couldn't have been really a KGB asset. He was just a freaking businessman, building hotels, making money, doing what businessmen do. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't involved in politics. He clearly doesn't know how to do politics. Because
hey, Dan, a couple of questions. And actually, I was going to ask everybody here this and all in that space. But one, never been involved in that space, knock on wood and all of that. But it does seem to me that business owners can be involved in spying and other techniques. I don't think that it's just politicians that can be involved in that space and everything. So that was one point I was going to make, because I definitely know that in books that I've read in that space, that there have definitely been folks that have been compromised in different industries, including business and medicine and other things. So I can't say that just because there's only politicians that are targeted in by different organizations. But
definitely not, Mark. Sometimes it's their son.
But the question I had for everybody is, we talked about, and I know it's part of your poll question that I alluded to earlier, but if we go all the way back to the beginning of the country, 1776 and all in that kind of space, when has there not been a foreign influence in politics? Because I'm thinking about France's influence. I mean, we bought land from France. That's where Louisiana came from and all of that. And there's definitely been English influence. There's definitely been influences from other parts of the world. So when have there not been a time that the United States was not at least being heavily courted by foreign powers to the point of your poll? Or is there been, or because sometimes people act like this is new, like they act like this whole notion of the parties being at each other is new as well. And as I recall, there was a famous duel, and that was back in like the 1700th century as well. So I don't know that people going at each other or cat fighting against each other, as some people were describing what was taking place during the State of the Union, is new either, because there have been some famous incidences that are 100 or 200 years old. But I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts about this. Is this something new, or am I correct that it is not something new at all?
Not something new at all, really. Corruption.
There is an aspect of it, Dan, that I think is new. I think the brazenness, where people are going there and they don't give a damn about the Constitution and patriotism and what's best for the country. They look what's best for themselves, and they'll lie and cheat, and they'll take stuff underneath the table because they'll figure what's the big deal, or they just don't care about America. I really believe that.
I think that's what Biden and his family did. And the difference between Biden and Trump, by the way, and Biden is a Chinese asset. So, he's influenced. It's like, what do you do when these people, these politicians, these corrupt politicians take dark money and or take dark money opportunities from the international bank and other things, and don't care about the American people, are not worried about the American agenda. And it's ironic that Sasha, you mentioned Trump is you said he was a KGB asset and all this other stuff. He's the only president that didn't benefit financially from the presidency. He's become poorer since he lost the election, not richer. Meanwhile, look, Obama and
the Clintons,
all the others have become
big time,
wildly successfully financial. Clinton was near bankruptcy in the presidency because of all his misdeeds.
The words Hillary used, Dan, was dirt poor.
And Hillary, yeah, exactly. So that's my point, is that you look at all this corruption and all this dark money. Now, the Clintons made their money, as they say, by speeches. No. Well, those were even suspect, but by dark money investments through their foundations and taking money from countries, foreign countries around the world. Notice how all those donations dropped off dramatically after she lost to Trump. It's really interesting, Sasha, that it's easy to point the finger at and again, Biden's corruption is public because he was a public official, and he was using his position or his former position as a public official to create benefit for his family. Corruption. Trump was not a public official. He was a private businessman, and he was doing business all around the world. So I imagine he had relationships everywhere, but private business relationships, right?
Yeah,
There's a difference between a private businessman doing business around the world, international business, and a public figure, politician, elected and sworn to uphold the Constitution as part of their to take business deals and to do other things that undermine the United States of America.
Dan, there is one very
You
important
would bring in
consideration.
Steve as well, just
Trump, by the year 2000, not only he was broke, lost all his father's money, his own money, he was under the debt of $400 million. So he was even less than zero. Furthermore, as I said before, no U.S. bank would touch him, period.
Other than Deutsche Bank, right?
Deutsche Bank is not American bank. It's a German bank.
It's not a German bank.
It's a German bank which operates in the United States,
Right.
and through which all the Russian oligarchs, mafia, they were all moving and operating through Deutsche Bank around the world. So they, because at that time, obviously, Trump was already KGB asset, and
Really?
they wanted to prop him up, and eventually run for president. So
Is
they
that right?
Absolutely. They helped him tremendously. And in a few short years, all of a sudden he amassed considerable fortune and was on his way up. So when you're saying that he didn't make any money during his presidency, he didn't need to make any money during his presidency. Well, his daughter needed, so she's got $100 million for Arabs on her first trip to her foundation. But that's beside the point. That's his family. Anyway, so I just would like to finish is that it's much more dangerous proposition to have a president as a KGB asset than, and remember what's happened in Finland when he says that he doesn't
allegations. This is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And you have an obvious bias. We all agree that you do. That you have an obvious bias. You don't like Trump, right?
Hey, Dan, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Dan
that,
and Sasha,
so
before y'all get
known from even
Mark, I'm
people-
enjoying this.
Okay.
people
Well, I was
who
actually
were
going to
known
throw in
socially
some more
done.
conversation as well, because I'm going to actually pull Steve in, because since we're talking about world corruption and everything in that nature and everything, there is a certain another part of the world that is getting some serious flack and everything because of business influences. And I don't know if Steve has been following this story, but apparently Prime Minister Modi over there in India is having some accusations going as well. So he told the Indians over there in India to not, quote unquote, swallow the lies and abuses against him as oppositing opposition critics has accused his government of giving undue favors to a business group led by a billionaire tycoon, Gautam Adani. So I don't know if you've been following this story or if you have any thoughts around this story or anything
Are
of
the
that nature.
Cowboys attacking the Indians over in India?
Corruption is so rampant in India. And when I was in India a few years ago, there's a sign that said in India, and take your bribes here. I mean, so you go in line.
They did take your bribes there.
Well, no, but if you want to bribe a politician, there's a line, and you go there and you pay them. And
Well,
something as simple as like when you go to an Indian airport and you ask them, like, can you reserve my flight? They go, how much you got? And
it's that open.
Yeah, I mean, if you pay,
for
you pay 800 rupees, you go in the front of the line. If you don't pay, they throw your stuff out. And because I was with the former mayor, one of my colleagues, the mayor, we went to India a few years ago. He refused to pay, and the guy took all of his stuff out of the bag and threw it out and said, "Go to the end of the line." And then he was in the line for like 3 or 4 hours.
No soup for you.
Yeah, but along those same lines, I know that Biden was talking about taxes on the rich and everything. And apparently over there in India, this Rahul Gandhi, the leader of the opposition Congress party, was questioning in Parliament why the government has not yet initiated an inquiry over the use of tax havens. So I know that there's been conversations around tax havens in the U.S., but also in the parts of the world like India. So any thoughts around this?
Well, his grandfather was the other father of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, Rahul Gandhi, and his grandmother was the his mother. No, actually, no, his great grandfather was the father of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. But I don't know much about the tax evasion scheme. But the bottom line is corruption is rampant in India. Not a surprise there. I don't know enough about the details. I think at the end of the day, corruption is a concern with government officials. There's a lot of stringency and regulations, and white-collar crime is taken very seriously. I know Governor Blagojevich in Illinois did prison time, or might still be in prison for saying a Senate seat was for sale and all that stuff, right? So, but shifting the turn real quick, I don't know, maybe we already talked about it, but Sasha, what is going on with the next big attack? Apparently, Ukraine's preparing for a Russian attack near the northern border of Belarus. Any insight on that? When it will happen?
It's being in preparation. On 24th will be exactly 1 year since the beginning of the invasion, and Putin, of course, would like to commemorate the date with a substantial victory in Ukraine, and there are debates whether he's going to attack Kyiv again, or maybe he will just try to consolidate his positions in eastern Ukraine, so-called Donetsk, Lugansk regions. So nobody really understands what he's up to. The only thing is that although Ukrainians have to be very, very careful, be on highest alert about this, but general opinion of experts is that Russians will not be able to get much going on with their attack, because when they started a year ago and they had the best army at that time, all trained people, and considerable advantage because of the timing of their attack, so Ukrainians were not prepared, and many other considerations, they were at the best shape at that time. Now, his army has been exterminated by now. So all those new people who are fighting for Russia, they're all recent mobilized people who don't have a lot of training and poorly equipped and so on. The only thing is that their number has increased. But as I said in my Yesterday Ukrainian program, when you have a meat grinder and there comes a very good meat, not so good meat, meat of highest quality or meat third grade quality, for meat grinder, it doesn't really matter. You take this meat and that meat and another meat and so on. So that's what Ukrainians have created, is a giant meat grinder who are just absorbing all these bodies. And in one day, just I think day before yesterday, they killed 1,030 Russian soldiers. And by the way, there was an interview with on a couple of days ago on television. There was 102 years old Ukrainian woman who was doing the mask equipment, so they could hide behind this thing. So that she was suing, and she was interviewed. She spoke Ukrainian, and it was instant translation, so I could hear translation, but I couldn't hear her exact word. But what she said is that every Russian soldier on Ukrainian soil has to be exterminated, and this is what I'm trying to do.
Hey, Sasha, I'm getting ready to ask a slightly different question, just to switch, but still staying on world issues and everything. I'm going to change the headline and everything, and then I'll tell where this is happening. But I was wondering, Lee and everybody here, if I was to say this headline, and then I'll say where it's actually happening. Protesters attacked banks over a cash shortage, police and residents said, as tensions flare 3 weeks before a presidential election. The country has been crippled by fuel shortages for weeks, and cash dispensers are running empty after a sudden currency swap. Now, in a little bit, I'm going to tell where this is actually happening. But is this something that could happen in the United States? Is this something that we need to fear? If it's not happening in the United States, but is there the possibility of a cash shortage? Is there a possibility of tensions flaring in the country before a presidential election? And is there a possibility of fuel shortages and cash dispensers running empty after a currency swap here in the U.S.? And then after y'all answer that question, I'll tell where this is actually happening at.
100%. I wouldn't put anything past our government to create shortages, whether it's in fuel, whether it's in cash, whether it's in fertilizer, whatever.
And it's all deep fakes. It's all deep fakes. It's never real. It's always generated by the government or the minions of the government.
What is your take, Steve? Could something like that happen? Is that something you're concerned about? That we could have a fuel shortage or a tensions flaring,
right?
or definitely even cash running out?
Aspirin,
burning.
Tylenol.
I mean, anything's possible, you know. I mean,
it's all a con.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, that's the problem with the technology. You don't know whether it's, you know, fictitious, fake news, you know, artificial intelligence. I mean, you know, it's
Steve.
Well, like I said,
Steve, we need just to go outside and look at the pump in the store shelves to know whether it's true or not.
Well, like I said, I was just curious because this was actually happening in Africa's most populous country, just to let folks know, because this is actually what is being reported to be happening right now in Nigeria. So apparently Africa's most populous country has been crippled by fuel shortages for weeks, and cash dispensers are running empty after that sudden currency swap and all of that. But that is supposed to be one of the bigger countries there in Africa and one of the more populous ones. And definitely it looks like they are facing some serious problems there in that part of the world and everything.
What currency did they swap to?
That is a good question. I'm going to try to find that out within the story, because I thought that they were.
Is that why they're short of cash? Is because of the swap? They didn't have enough replacement cash.
Well, they're going to go to the polls on February 25th to select a successor to their current president, Buhari, who will be stepping down at the end of 2 terms in office. So he had 2 terms in office, and apparently in his 2 terms, he had all kinds of problems, because I also know that they were having their own version of Black Lives Matter against their police force over the last several years, because it was even before.
Aren't they all black in Nigeria mostly?
It is, but like I said, Black Lives Matter in that case was about and it was around tribal differences and other differences.
Oh, Dan, that's a good point. I'm confused. If blacks are the majority and are all, why would Black Lives Matter get involved?
Well, I mean, I didn't say the organization got involved. I just said that there was parallels that were made during that time, because it was more about the corruption of the police force to what was going on there in Nigeria to the Black Lives Movement.
Oh, that's that BS. You know,
so there were parallels made. These were parallels made by Nigerians. I'm not saying anything that I'm figuring out of school. I've heard these parallels made. We had a gentleman on our network. I'm trying to get him back, but Brother Mike had actually police officers from those different neighborhoods when he had his show Mind Closet here on the network, and definitely they even themselves made the parallels and everything. I actually had the pleasure, I think that was a year and a half or 2 years ago, of being on a couple of those shows. So that's not a parallel that I made. They made the parallel themselves. And they did say that it was a lot around the kind of the ways that the police forces were handled, and that they had some serious corruption in their police force, and they felt that some of the Americans had serious corruptions in some of their police forces. I'm not saying all, because I've got friends that work in the police force, and I've got relatives that work in certain police agencies as well. So I'm not saying that that is an across the board thing, but that was the parallel that they made.
Well, to acknowledge that there's evil across in the world it's simple. There are evil people out there. There are corrupt people out there. That's not the majority, but it's not just restricted to America, of course. Slavery wasn't restricted to America.
I mean, we got a story about Brazil. Brazil, their leader at one time was compared. I don't know if it's the same leader that's in their office now, but I do know that one of their leaders was at one time compared to Trump, and now Brazil is launching an operation to drive illegal miners from their Yanomami lands. So they have launched a raid against what they are saying are illegal gold miners in that territory. And my guess is that that is native territory, because that's what that sounds like. And there are probably people that are going in there without the blessings of the tribes that are there. So they are going to push them out in that sense. So that sounds like that is something else that is going on. And I think people have a right to protect the integrity of their land. I mean, there's been poaching throughout the world of all kinds of things, including products, animals, and a number of other things. So if we can stop those things, I don't have any problem with that. I don't know if anybody else on this panel does. Oh.
Well, I don't know what anyone else says about that, but it's just been. I'm really concerned about these gas shortages in Africa, and there's a big Nigerian community here in North Carolina, so I'll try to connect back with them, see if they can give us insight. Maybe we can bring them on the show. Meanwhile, the earthquake, 17,000 dead, and I heard this morning on WRAL that on the news show here in North Carolina that there could be a possibility of saying of this happening in California, a similar type of earthquake. Would be devastating, right?
Why would it happen just in just in California? You got to remember that it was several years back that there are fault lines throughout the United States and everything. We had that earthquake several years back that surprised people here in North Carolina. So I don't think it would be maybe as much of a danger as in California and maybe other places that have a stronger fault line. But there are fault lines even underneath our area and underneath, I won't say there are fault lines underneath New York where Lee is at. There's probably fault lines underneath Utah. I mean, that would be a serious.
Oh, yeah. There are major fault lines under Utah.
Oh,
there's the caldera in Yellowstone Park that could blow at any time.
Oh, yeah, well, real quickly, guys, we have a few more minutes left. I want to dive into the political arena and talk a little bit about the State of the Union and where we go from here. So clearly Biden is running again, even though he keeps using the word intention. The question is, will Kamala be on the ticket? And it does look like, I know some of you don't think Trump will win, but I do think Trump will be the nominee. Trump responded back. But I want to defer to Dan Worthington. As a Republican, what were your thoughts of Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders? I just didn't see her to be a very strong response. If I were the Republicans, I would have. I don't know. Maybe I was missing something, but I didn't know if you had any feedback on that.
Well, no, I didn't pay much attention to either one of them. I was one of the majority of Americans that did not listen to the idiot Dewey State of the Union address because I figured it'd be just more lies and subterfuge. I did hear that he ignored most of the key issues that are important to Americans today in his talk and claimed success that really wasn't happening in real America with real Americans. And, it's real interesting, the amount of ignorance and audacity that the Democrats are showing in their public space.
But in my opinion, the Republican address showed even more ignorance. And to me, it just seemed to me that the whole problem of your party is that.
Well, no, why? First, it's not my party because I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. But secondly, what I understand she addressed was the economy stupid, the energy shortages, the tax on the indirect tax on the American people, the bad policies, the immigration problem that this administration has completely ignored, or exacerbated. Right? I mean,
The second, Dan.
policy. Right? I mean, it's just.
But they do have a policy, Dan. It's open borders.
I know. Let as many people in as possible, give themselves,
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
and then fly them off to wherever you're going to drop them in the United States. That Republicans send a few busloads to Kamala's place. Well, they can fly them off to where they want them to go from there. It really doesn't matter. I mean, this is all part of an organized attempt by the Democrats to bring in more and more illegal people to the United States. We all know that. I mean, it's clear. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. So no, I don't think that from what I know about her response, I think it was spot on because Biden was absolutely silent about all the. He didn't even mention the stupid balloon that the security POFA that he was involved in. I mean, FOPA. I mean, the guy is incompetent. I mean, how long did he have to practice that stupid talk in front of the mirror and in front of his people before he's able to deliver it without stuttering it or stammering or falling all over himself? And he probably still had a teleprompter and probably wouldn't have been able to deliver it without that. So, your party, if you're going to start, because you are a Democrat, I know a conservative Democrat, but
Yes.
Your party is the party of weakness, the party of poor policies, the party that's destroying the American people and the American dream right now. You're the party of the trans
Dan,
and the woke.
no, Dan, hold on a second. I know I was going to ask you. I was actually going to throw this to Sasha because
the party of non-family
apparently
values.
two of the Trump people.
The party that's
No,
destroying
hold on a second.
the very
One of the
heart of
members.
American values. And
Hold on a second, because I got a question. I got a question for everybody, and it's actually addressed toward
truth.
Sasha, but it's also addressed to you as well, because you say that the Democrats are the party of wanting to tear apart things and everything. But one of those Trump advocates, and he said he's a Trump advocate, is Representative Matt Gaetz. He is a Republican in Florida, and apparently he is introducing a resolution in the House on today that calls on the Biden administration to, quote unquote, end U.S. military and financial aid to Ukraine, while also urging all involved to secure a peace agreement after nearly a year of war in the region. So the resolution introduced by Gaetz and 10 co-sponsors call for the U.S. to end its military and financial aid to Ukraine and urges all combatants to reach a peace agreement. So
I
that's
hope he
actually
was-
coming from the Republican Party.
Well,
I hope he was well paid by Putin and his people for this.
are you
because-
well paid by the Ukrainians
to-
for your opinion?
Just to understand, it's my own opinion, and I don't listen to other people's opinion. I provide my opinion for other people to
I
listen
don't
to.
imagine
If they
he's
want to.
giving a dime
But
for it.
I listen to Schwetz, though. The Schwetz is a highly esteemed independent supplier of information to top U.S. corporations. He is very well informed. He knows what he's talking about. And when he published his material on Trump, it
Oh, is
wasn't.
he a Democrat?
He he never revealed
Yeah,
that.
he's a
but I was-
Democrat.
Hey,
He's a
Sasha,
Democrat.
He's a
Sasha and
Democrat.
Dan, hold on a
Listen,
second.
being Democrat is not such a bad thing, Dan, as you're trying to
Really?
say. Come
No,
on,
no.
yes, because America is a democratic country.
No, we're not. We're
What-
Republican.
And
We're
no,
Republican.
no, it's a
We're not
democratic
a democracy.
country.
We're a constitutional republic.
But
There's a-
your Republican
know that,
Party
right?
is
Right?
doing absolutely incredible
as a
things.
Canadian, you wouldn't
to-
know that.
No, I don't know that. I agree with you on that. But listen,
Well,
Republican
then you haven't read our own
we don't
constitution.
have any focus.
You don't know
We
how
have
to
any
separate the
agenda.
powers.
They are not
The
trying to
balance
tell
of power was
people
created
no.
in the United
That's
States
what I see.
on purpose, right?
No, I see what's happening is that the Putin was Trump's master, and Trump was doing
See, that's your
all
opinion.
and everything.
You
No,
know,
it's
I've had
it's
this
been proven
Now,
over
listening
and
to your
over
opinions
again.
about Ukraine,
And if Robert
it's all
Mueller would be
one-sided.
able to
Not that I
continue
am
his
any supporter of
investigation, he
Russians
would follow
and
the money. He
Russians,
never was allowed
but
to
I
do
mean,
that.
kill all
He
Russians,
would
do
follow
this,
the money.
do that,
He would
all
definitely get
one-sided,
the crooks of the
very
money. And this
biased,
is
very
why
hateful.
Trump will never, ever
Hang
again
in
be
there.
a
So, I mean,
president
you
of the
know,
United
Sasha,
States.
you just
It's
have no
not going
credibility
to
with me
happen.
about anything when it
Period.
comes
Full
to
stop.
Ukraine.
Hello, Trump is not going to be president of the United States.
Good,
Ever. That's
good,
it.
good.
He's gonna
That's
lose to
the
Biden.
All of
goal.
your
That's the goal of all these Democratic operatives. is
and
to tear
and,
him
and
down
many
and make sure
Republicans
he
as
can't.
well. Democrats, many Republicans as well would.
Oh yeah, because they're
Well,
it's
no,
about
hold on. I'm wrong.
It's not about
They
Trump,
want him to
right?
run.
It's
As
about,
soon as he
about
runs,
multinational
then the
power
presidency is in
and those
Democratic
who would,
hands.
who
Because
would
it doesn't
want to
matter. It's a Biden. It's
dominate
Democrats.
the
It's just
world
anybody.
in the new world
Anybody
order.
will
It
beat
isn't
Trump.
about
You have to be
Democrat or
complete idiot not to beat Trump.
And then think about it. I mean, you know, even like Adam Lamparello keeps saying Donald Trump was the best president in this country's history. You know, the funny part of it is that there's only been four presidents since the last 30 years have not been reelected to a second term. Gerald Ford, which doesn't really count, George H.W. Bush, Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, and Donald Trump. I mean, you think about that. After you had 8 years, you had 8 years of
I
Nixon.
agree with you that
I mean, he was a loser.
With Adam,
he lost.
that Trump was one of the most effective presidents.
Oh,
that
yes.
served.
Twice
But
impeached,
it was
lost
kinda like
Senate,
That's why
lost
he lost-
House,
he lost a
everything was
landslide.
there is
He
to
lost
lose.
in a
He lost
landslide.
everything. He
It
is
wasn't
a
a landslide.
pathetic
It was a
loser.
landslide.
That's all there is to Trump.
It
A
was-
loser.
Because the media and the social media organizations conspired against him to
Oh my
defeat
God,
him in
how
the election.
unfair.
You know that. We know
Oh,
that.
poor
Everybody knows that.
baby. Oh my God, that's so unfair.
No,
I
it's
think
absolutely true. I mean, my
but he was
God,
reinstated. then.
everyone in the United States knows that. I mean, they can see that. The difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is the Democrats think it was their responsibility to defeat him that way. The Republicans feel like they were cheated, right? Now, I think it was not. I don't think it was a good thing that Biden was elected, but there wasn't anybody else running. Trump would have been a better choice, but Trump was a dangerous choice because of the division. And the Democrats would have continued the riots in the streets and all this bullshit that they created during his first administration, and the unlawfulness and everything else. They would have continued that through their operatives. If Trump was elected, they would have burned Washington down if they would have tried to anyway. We would have been in civil war if that would have happened, because the Democrats would have caused civil war. They started creating civil war. That's what was happening in the streets of America, because the Democrats didn't like what Trump was doing. They couldn't win. They couldn't win politically, so they were doing it through physical force and theft and just property destruction.
Dan,
You're serious in the view of January 6th. Insurrection which Trump has
January 6th
engineered. It was Trump's baby. And now
No,
you're
it wasn't.
talking
It
about
was the
how violent
FBI's baby.
Democrats.
It was the FBI's baby and Pelosi.
No. Then this
The
is
other side of it was,
theory.
and you know,
Trump
and we know
has
it, and
planned
the FBI
that
knows it,
plan
and they refuse
since
to
he lost
testify about
election. The day he lost election, he already planned every step. And his horrible phone call to Georgia representative.
Once again, you're
crime
biased
crime
and
after
your
crime.
obvious blind spot when it comes to Trump. Again, I don't want him reelected, but I think the January 6th
Sasha mentioned the phone call. Is that the phone call? The $1 billion you're not going to get USOBs?
Hey,
No,
Dan
I'm
and
talking
everybody
about
else, hold on a second. Hey, Dan
to
and everybody else.
Georgian representatives when he asked to find 11,000 votes. That's phone call. that
Hey,
I'm-
Dan, just
Oh,
to let
come on.
hey, hold on a
And
second.
Elon
Just let
said
everybody
that
know.
call.
Just
Wait.
let everybody know the quote that
Well, I mean,
the
that's
Gets
what
put
Biden
out
people
and everything
did in
is,
Pennsylvania,
which actually I do kind of
Minnesota,
agree with, but
and
I love to hear
Wisconsin.
other.
They needed 20,000 some odd votes.
Then,
They
but
found
look,
them, right?
Dan, we
Stop
have 5
the
people here on the panel.
swimming in
How
after
many
me.
of us 5
Stop
people want
counting.
Trump to be reelected?
Dan, you mean stop printing?
How
Hey,
many of
Stop
us?
printing the ballots. I mean, you got to print more, right? We're
Okay, Dan, we
you
have
wasn't
5
able to do
people
that
on the
because you had
panel
no
here.
operation to print
Could
the
you
ballots
tell me
like the
who
Democrats
is
did.
at least one person out of 5 wants Trump to be reelected? Show
I
me
don't
one.
want Trump to be reelected. That's not the point.
Lee, do you want Trump to be reelected?
As opposed to who? See, the problem was he was running against Hillary. I didn't want Hillary being elected.
Oh,
I didn't want
Hillary.
Biden being elected. No, the
You
thing
know
is, it's a bilateral decision. You have one or the other. You don't get a
But,
pool of
hey,
candidates.
hey, Lee, I got a question as well. It's kind of along the lines of what Sasha said. Somebody asked Trump whether he would actually get behind whoever was elected if it wasn't him. And he kind of danced around that because he was basically saying that, it depends on who it is and everything in that space. So it sounds like there are some candidates that are in the that are going to be running against him that he is not feeling all that comfortable with and all in that space. He said that Nikki Haley is overly ambitious, and he also said that Pompeo was all right as in his office during the time that he was serving with him. It didn't sound like he had a lot of love for DeSantis because he basically thinks that DeSantis is not all that great of a candidate either. So is it something that whoever is the nominee for either party, that they all have to get behind the candidate, or do you think that Trump is having the right attitude of being like, depends on who it is, and if it's not the right one, then I might go off and form my own party, or maybe I'll just like sit off on the sidelines?
How can you answer that question before the facts have come out? You don't know how it's going to play out. That's like a boxer saying, that's a simple question. Yeah, I understand that, but that's like a boxer saying, will you accept the results of what the referees say? But the referees sometimes fix fights. What are you supposed to do? To accept a fixed fight? No.
Well,
Hopefully it won't be fixed, but that does happen.
When I've been running recently in politics, I've been running to rap music now. Eminem, Snoop Dogg. I mean, I used to run to because it's just the way politics is now, right? I mean, it's
a blood sport.
Yeah, it's totally a blood sport. By the way, I'm glad that you mentioned the rap music because I was going to give Dan a little bit of a great victory in a part of his life and everything, because I know that he is a major supporter of the Church of
Latter-day Saints.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember the full name and everything, but the Church of the Latter-day Saints. And I did see that a major rapper has joined their ranks and everything, and he's actually a well-known rapper. But yes, he is definitely recently come out that he was going to be joining the Church of the Latter-day Saints, and is definitely looking forward to it because he's been spending a lot of time over there in Utah, and was saying that a lot of the folks in that community had helped him quite a bit. So he is now about to join that whole religious group in that space. So definitely I saw that on the news yesterday.
I imagine his lyrics will change a bit.
You think his lyrics are going to change and everything?
Yeah.
Because he was like one of the top rappers out there and everything. So, and they do say that he has added some lyrics from the whole Bible that the Mormons have and all in that space. So
it's not a Bible; it's called the Book of Mormon. It's sort of
the Book of Mormon. I was trying to remember the
scripture
name.
between the Old
he
Testament.
Got some from the Book of Mormon, but yes, Young Boy is the rapper's name, and he is definitely said that he is about to do that whole. I think that if you join later, you have to go through the conversion process and all of that. But yes, he is definitely.
Well, folks, it's time to wrap up. I'm gonna go to my closeout, and I want to thank everyone for being with us today. I'm once again had a meeting that went over. My final take is that HubSpot, Cisco, Microsoft, NetApp, many major tech employees at Triangle are conducting massive layoffs this week. And yesterday I was on one of our radio shows talking about one area of our group of our citizens that are losing their jobs. It's the H-1B immigrants. And the law of the United States basically says that if they can get a job in 60 days, they had to go back to their respective countries. This has created turmoil back here in Morrisville and Cary, with significant amounts of immigrants from India out of jobs, sole breadwinners, the kids not being able to retain in the schools because they have to leave the country. And it really made me think about how there's different hues of immigration. But in this instance, I think skilled immigration is about the talent and the talent pipeline. And I think in the labor economics, we're taking people out of the economy that could actually work, which is going to actually make it even harder to find the workers that we need. Hopefully, our Congress and Senate can identify this one area of immigration. While I do agree with Dan Worthington that the immigration issue from a border perspective isn't being adequately addressed by the Biden administration as we continue to let people pour in over the border. Meanwhile, we've got people here that are paying taxes, working in our tech economy, that are now being said, well, you can't get a job. I'll close out with this. Most of us who lose jobs, we have time for a severance package. We have time to network. We have time to go to job fairs. In this case, many of the Indian American immigrants who are here, who have lost their jobs, time is not on their hands. We'll talk about that next week as we talk about immigration policy in the United States. And of course, Sasha Starr, many of them are actually moving to Canada because they believe Canada is going to be more welcoming to them, which I think will hurt the U.S. economy in the long term. Thank you all for being with us today on this wonderful show. We'll be back tomorrow for wrapping up the week. We pray for Turkey and Syria. And once again, every day that goes by, we're getting closer and closer to 2024. Before you know it, we'll be in Iowa and New Hampshire talking about the Democratic and Republican primaries, the presidency of the United States. Thank you all so much. We'll be back soon.
Yes.
Take care, Steve, Mark, Dan, and Sasha.
Thanks, everyone.